Welcome back, guys. So recently we took a look at the Cool Baby X7. I thought this thing was garbage. Had a very neat look to it, that DIY style. Played Famicom cartridges. It's essentially a Famiclone handheld system. And it had a bunch of issues. It runs all the games in PAL 50 hertz. The screen quality wasn't that great. A lot of people did tell me you could swap out the PPU and CPU for the North American NES versions and get a lot better results. So I am looking into that. I thought I had components, but I've either misplaced them or lost them. So once I get that taken care of, we will be revisiting that handheld because I'm really curious to see how that turns out. But today what we're going to be looking at is another product from Cool Baby that has a very similar DIY style to it. Now, I don't know what this thing is specifically called. It was sent to me by Ploy Lab, and on their site it is listed as, and get ready for this, it's a mouthful. Oh my God. The open source console retro arcade game player for Raspberry Pi 3B Plus Motherboard. Holy crap. If that doesn't explain what this thing is, I don't know. What else could you call it, right? So this thing is essentially a RetroPie handheld. It runs actually a Compute Module 3 Plus, which is a bare bones board that shares the same specs as the Raspberry Pi 3B Plus. So it's missing certain features of it. It's really meant for specific projects, but it has the same performance and power of a regular Raspberry Pi 3B Plus. Just doesn't have, USB ports, Bluetooth, that kind of thing, right? So that is crammed into this thing with their own little custom board. And I thought that was neat. I know other companies have made handhelds with the same CM modules and whatnot. And it's a very cool thing to see out there. With this, I was really intrigued because I do like that acrylic look. It just looks awesome to me. But is this handheld worth it? So there are things I dislike and like about this. So I want to get into all that. Now, if you want to use this as a console, you can. It has HDMI out and 4 USB ports to use additional controllers or whatever else. Now, one of the most important things with a handheld are the buttons. And for the most part, they're fine. But these top shoulder buttons with them they're actual buttons, very, very clicky and stiff, being recessed underneath the acrylic up there, your fingers kind of scratch on it. They're really out of reach, not very comfortable to use. So playing things on Super Nintendo, Dreamcast, PlayStation 1, or other games that will utilize additional buttons beside the 4 that are on the front, it's going to be a hassle. So that has to be pointed out. Now, the face buttons, as far as the A, B, X, Y, they're free floating. They have the tabs on the buttons to where they would lock into place, but since they cut this into an acrylic panel, they don't have the locking, pieces etched into it to make them lock. So they just float around. That could be an issue for some. The D-pad doesn't have that problem, feels fine to me. The analog stick, very big ass analog stick, performs decently well as well. So I really like the look of this thing. They got all those logos on there. I'm sure they don't have permission. Maybe Soulja Boy helped them design this thing. But as far as the performance goes, how does this thing run? How does the screen look? Now, performance-wise, this stuff runs exactly the same as it would on a Raspberry Pi 3B Plus because it's just the compute module version of it. So you can expect all the same quirks and, things that run fantastically well, things that some of the games will run okay, like Nintendo 64 or Dreamcast, and, some will not run that great. It's going to be exactly the same here. PlayStation 1, you're going to get very good compatibility with that. Most of those games are going to be just fine. Now, the one thing I want to talk about is the way this was sent to me. So it did have games built in. It did have a RetroPie image already built. Now, yes, you could just take another Raspberry Pi 3 image and throw it on here and be just fine. But I want to talk more about what they sent me here, because with this build, if you're looking to buy this and just use it, plug and play, or just put it in your hand and play, however you want to say it, the games are all listed with the metadata in like Chinese. Some of it looked like it could have been Japanese. I'm not 100%. Don't get on me about it. I don't give a shit, to be honest with you. But that could be a problem for a lot of people, not knowing what the hell you're looking at. Some of the games will be in English when you play them, and then some will not be. So that is definitely a hassle if you're interested in this device. A lot of these companies, man, they market this towards the North American audience, as far as people they want to sell to. And they don't keep any of that in mind, like with included instructions being all in Chinese or a build like this being all in Chinese. It's a little crazy, you know what I mean? But it's easily resolved by just downloading another image that you want to use and throwing it on here, and it'll work just fine. So I had to point that out. Gameplay, everything's performing just fine the way I would expect it. Dreamcast, some games will be good, running at almost full speed without any glitches, and then some games will start off glitchy, maybe some sound issues, and then work okay. For me, I don't really like playing those types of games. So they don't work perfectly fine from the get-go. There's some stutter in action, some weirdness going on. I don't want to mess with this. So I typically don't play Dreamcast or Nintendo 64 on the Raspberry Pi. I like using the Raspberry Pi for some retro goodness as far as old school consoles go that were before the Dreamcast. You know, you would hope Nintendo 64, but it's all good. You know, playing Super Nintendo, NES, Turbo Graphics, MAME games from, you know, the early 2000s and prior should be not much of an issue. You know, a lot of work can go into getting a retro Pi image polished up and nice. And, you know, with this image, there's nothing necessarily wrong with it, but it is a very basic, just drag and drop a bunch of ROMs into their folders and just throw it out there type of thing. So nothing really special going on with this build. Like I said, the main thing is I would want to just put a different image on this thing that suits me and what I want to play. So as you've looked through this video, the screen quality I think is really nice. Like that's one of the best things about this device. But is this something that I could recommend to you? So the company who sent it out to me, looking at their website, this damn thing is $200. I think that's a lot of money. I think this thing is neat. It's actually pretty awesome in my opinion, other than the few little quirks that it has. Some design choices that I don't like those shoulder buttons. But yeah, it's very hard to recommend a device like this. You could use it as like a retro Pi version of a Nintendo Switch because you plug it into your TV or use it in handheld mode. But is that worth $200? There's a lot of people out there making similar devices, either in like Game Boy type shells, Game Boy Advance shells, or other custom, you know, types of devices. And, you know, the pricing can be pretty high for these things. So it's really up for you to decide. But for me, I would say, you know, this being in handheld mode, it's kind of hard to actually enjoy it with how it's set up. Yeah, it's not very ergonomic. The shoulder buttons aren't great. So it's kind of a pass when it comes to using this in a handheld situation. Plugging it into the TV, it looks kind of cool. It's like a whole little handheld that's plugged into the TV, but you could do that for $35 buying a Raspberry Pi 3B Plus or a Raspberry Pi 4, for example. So for me, while I think this thing is awesome, very neat, with those few little negatives about it, and it's still highly customizable, that's cool, it's gonna be very hard for me to say, yeah, run out and buy this thing, you know what I mean? But if it tickles your taint and you like what you see, link will be in the description. So let me know what you guys think down below. Are there any other Raspberry Pi handhelds out there that you think are awesome? Let me know. I'm aware of a few. Maybe I could take a look at some other ones in the future. But hey, really do appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. And with that said, I will catch you guys next time. Peace out. Bye-bye and boom. Bye.